Hi, and welcome back. So if you recall in our last video, what we did was we talked about the U.S. sentencing guideline, the sentencing table, and we talked about how a sentence can go up or down depending on the particular factors of the particular case, the factors of the individual defendant, and how sentences can vary wildly depending on those factors with the enhancements and the downward departures. So today what we're going to do is actually go through a real-life example and see how exactly it works with the sentencing guidelines. We're going to go through the enhancements, we're going to go through the downward departures, we're going to see just how drastically a sentence can change based on a few minor tweaks in the fact pattern. So if you take a look in front of you, there's the U.S. sentencing table there with the offense level and the criminal history category. And as we talked about before, every crime in federal court has a base level offense. So every crime is going to have a starting point on this table of where the offense level starts at and what the guideline range for that particular offense level is. Most criminal defendants in white-collar criminal cases will fall into the criminal history category 1. It means they've had no arrests or they've had very few arrests throughout their entire life. Most people are either executives or board members or business owners. They're not going to be people that have a high level of a criminal history. And that's exactly where you want to be, on the left-hand side of the sentencing table. So let's go through a particular hypothetical. So if you see in front of you, a defendant is charged with wire fraud. He's embezzled just under $1.5 million from his employer, and he has no criminal history. So the base level offense for wire fraud is 7 points, and then because this is a loss of more than $550,000, we're going to enhance the sentence by 14 points. Now we're also going to add an additional 2 points because he used sophisticated means in committing the fraud, and he also abused his position of trust. So what that brings us to is an offense level of 26. And that means his guideline range will be 63 to 78 months. So now this only captures the enhancements so far. So what we're going to do now is go through the downward departures to see just how different the sentence will be, and then we'll see that mapped out on the sentencing table. So moving on to the downward departure. Again, the current base level offense is 26 points. We're going to take 2 points off for acceptance of responsibility. And what acceptance of responsibility is, it's basically pleading guilty, not going to trial, and just acknowledging your error and doing so in a way that doesn't allow the government to have to waste resources preparing for trial. So you accept responsibility, you get an additional 2 points off, and then you get an additional point off for accepting responsibility at a time where the government doesn't have to prepare for trial. So you can get up to 3 points off with the acceptance of responsibility and the timely notification, and that brings the total offense level down to 23 points. So the point total for the hypothetical will be 23, and a defendant who elects to go to trial will not get the reduction of 3 points. So that's one thing that's going to be a big difference, is if someone decides to go to trial, they're not going to get the 3 points off versus someone that does. That the sentence is going to fluctuate based on that. Now let's see this mapped out at the sentencing table. So we talked about earlier that the base level offense for wire fraud is 7. So we're talking about 0 to 6 months. It increases 14 levels just because of the amount of the fraud. And this is where the defendant ends up with just under $1.5 million. It's 46 to 57 months. That takes into account the enhancements and the downward departures. Going further, if the fraud had been just over $1.5 million, now we're looking at an enhancement which would take us to a sentence of at least 11 months more than where the defendant who embezzled $10,000 less would be. So you could see here based on this table that the dollar amounts matter, the criminal history category matters a lot, the enhancements of the abuse of trust, as well as the downward departures of the acceptance of responsibility and the timely notification can have drastic effects on the sentence. So obviously you could see here that the sentencing table plays a very important role in fashioning a sentence, and the whole purpose of it was for similarly situated defendants to have similar sentences. But obviously the minor tweaks in the fact pattern you can see really changes the sentence that a defendant's looking at. So in the next video, what we're going to talk about is the appellate waiver and how someone can file an appeal if they've had an appellate waiver in their plea agreement, and what the downfalls are of signing a plea agreement with an appellate waiver. So thanks a lot.